Landmark ruling out of the U.S. Supreme Court today. For the first time in history, a majority of justices have reached the same conclusion in an obscenity case. The court ruled 5-4, siding with Chief Justice Warren Burger, that First Amendment protection does not extend to obscenity, which was defined to include hardcore pornography. The court had previously been unable to reach agreement on the reasoning for or against pornography, mainly because the justices were unsure how to apply the First Amendment to it. The court referenced the opinion of obscenity reached in the 1957 case Roth v. U.S., in which the court declared that obscenity was defined as material in which the dominant theme taken as a whole appeals to the prurient interest, prurient meaning sexual. However, the court has since encountered difficulty in setting a universal standard using this test, and as such was faced with dozens of cases regarding obscenity wanting to be heard each term. The dispute in question arose when Marvin Miller, a pornography book distributor, was sued by a restaurant owner who did not wish to receive flyers for Mr. Miller's merchandise. For his opinion on the verdict, we now go to Mr. Marvin Miller. Mr. Miller, the court ruled against your argument that it is your First Amendment right to distribute advertisements for your pornographic merchandise because it is obscene. The court today defined obscene material as material that meets each of the following requirements. 1. The average person would find that the material as a whole is of a sexual appeal as determined by the standards of his or her community. 2. The material details or shows sexual functions or excretory functions. And 3. The work taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. Why do you believe that you have the freedom to advertise your works?
The First Amendment protects any form of speech that is not threatening. To ban expression here because of its obscenity is precisely contrary to the Founders' intentions, as well as the written amendment. Is there any particular reason why sexuality should be deemed obscene rather than any other aspect of life? No. The court and the government that appointed many of its members want to prevent the circulation of my materials because they find them offensive. The British government found the colonist speeches for freedom offensive, and thus the First Amendment was created to ensure that Americans could express themselves as they wished, no matter who was offended. If I want to wrap a burning flag around my head and run naked through a suburban neighborhood, then that is how I choose to express myself. It's not the government's job to protect kids from themes like protest and sexuality. The theocratic power complex just wants to impress their values upon everyone.
How do you think this ruling will affect the American public?
Well, obviously it will affect me and my business and our audience in a very negative way. The government is essentially interfering with a legitimate business's ability to compete. We are a part of the entertainment industry, and because of this, we will be at a competitive disadvantage against other forms of entertainment. Ultimately, I think the government will end up using this to control the private lives of Americans. It will just be one of the many ways that the socially conservative political movement will attempt to control the thoughts of the people. And hey, why are they trying to suppress a natural part of human behavior?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Miller. We will now get an opinion from the other side of the case from Nikal, Esquire, a lawyer for the state of California during this case. Good evening, Mr. Nikal.
Good evening.
Mr. Nikal, why do you think that pornographic advertisements should be banned?
Well, America's youth have no way of protecting themselves from that kind of material which they can find very harmful and obscene, offensive. So quite frankly, I believe that when you have material that the community agrees is wholly harmful, then much like a threatening statement, the individual's right to express himself should be superseded by the community's best interests, which in this case is not having pornography advertisements going around in the mail. And obviously the court agreed and stressed the limitations of the First Amendment.
So do you believe the limitations of the First Amendment should be based around what a community finds offensive?
The court set down a wise three-part test to determine what is obscene. One of the bars of the test established that obscenity would be determined in part by local, not national standards. I'm glad that the court's findings were consistent with the conservative principle of deciding what is right instead of the federal government dictating morality. Ultimately, I think this will help the American people by giving them the right to protect their communities from those who wish to harm them with obscene ideas.
Thank you, Mr. Nikal. Let's not forget that President Nixon was elected on a platform that included ending the liberalizing activism of the Warren Court, and that the president followed through by nominating Chief Justice Burger to replace Warren. In this case, the court could have used judicial activism to throw out the Roth ruling and make all forms of expression legal, no matter how obscene. Yet the court exercised judicial restraint by going with the previous ruling, only modifying its definition so as to make the enforcement more feasible. Good night, America.